The gunshot echoed through the dusty canyon as Emma Newcomb crouched behind the overturned wagon, clutching the small leather pouch containing everything she had left in the world. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory had shown her nothing but cruelty since the stagecoach robbery that had left her stranded, penniless, and utterly alone. Emma pressed her back against the splintered wood, her heart pounding as the sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder. The bandits who had attacked her stagecoach 3 days ago must have realized she'd escaped with her mother's jewelry, the only inheritance from a life back east that now seemed like a distant dream. "I know you're there, miss," a deep voice called out. "I ain't with them bandits." "Name's Matthew Morgan. I'm foreman at the Crescent Moon Ranch. Been tracking those outlaws since they hit your coach." Emma clutched her father's old pocket pistol tighter, the metal slick against her sweaty palm. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" She called back, her voice steadier than she felt. The hoofbeats slowed. "Well, madam, if I wanted to harm you, I reckon I wouldn't be announcing myself like a gentleman caller on Sunday." Despite everything, Emma felt a smile tug at her lips. She risked a glance over the edge of the wagon. A tall man sat astride a chestnut horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He wore no bandana to hide his features, and his hands were clearly visible on the saddle horn, far from his holstered gun. "Those men took everything," Emma said, slowly standing but keeping her father's pistol visible. "They killed the driver and another passenger." "I know," Matthew replied grimly, dismounting with careful movements. "Been on their trail since Flagstaff, found what was left of your coach yesterday." He removed his hat, revealing a weathered face with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. His hair was dark with flecks of silver at the temples, and a beard shadowed his jawline. "Where you headed, miss?" "Newcomb, Emma Newcomb," she hesitated, wondering how much to reveal. "I was going to Tucson. My uncle has a mercantile there." Matthew nodded, keeping a respectful distance. "You're about 40 miles off course, Miss Newcomb. Those outlaws drove you deep into Apache territory." His eyes flickered to the horizon. "Not safe to be out here, especially as night's coming." "My ranch is half a day's ride. You're welcome to shelter there while I get word to your uncle." Emma weighed her options, which were painfully few. 3 days of hiding, walking, and minimal food had left her exhausted. Her once fine traveling dress was torn and dusty, and her boots were wearing through at the soles. "Do you have water?" she asked finally, her parched throat making the decision for her. Matthew smiled, the genuine warmth reaching his eyes as he offered his canteen. "Fresh from the creek this morning, and there's biscuits in my saddlebag if you're hungry." The water was cool and tasted sweeter than anything Emma had ever known. She drank deeply, then accepted a biscuit wrapped in a clean cloth. As she ate, Matthew respectfully turned to scan the horizon, giving her a moment of privacy. "We should move," he said after she'd finished. "Those bandits might circle back, and I'd rather not meet any Apache war parties. They've been restless lately with the cavalry pushing boundaries again." Emma nodded, tucking her father's pistol into her skirt pocket. Matthew helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her, maintaining a proper distance as he could while ensuring she wouldn't fall. "Hold on to the saddle horn, Miss Newcomb. Samson here has a smooth gait, but the terrain's rough." As they rode, Emma found herself relaxing incrementally against Matthew's steady presence. The rhythm of the horse beneath them and the vast openness of the landscape made her feel strangely free despite her circumstances. "How long have you been in the territory, Mr. Morgan?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Going on 15 years now," he replied. "Came west after the war with nothing but my horse and saddle, started as a ranch hand and worked my way up." There was no boasting in his tone, just simple facts. "And you, Miss Newcomb, you don't strike me as someone born to the frontier." Emma looked down at her hands, once soft and pale, now reddened and calloused from her days in the wilderness. "I'm from Boston. My parents died last winter influenza." There was very little left after the debts were paid. "My uncle was kind enough to offer me a home." She didn't mention the failed engagement, the scandal that had followed when her fiancé abandoned her upon discovering her family's financial ruin. Some humiliations were still too raw to share with a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. Matthew didn't press for more. Arizona's different from Boston, that's certain, but there's beauty here if you know where to look. As if to prove his point, the setting sun painted the canyon walls in brilliant golds and reds, the shadows deepening to purple in the crevices. Emma found herself holding her breath at the stunning vista. "It's magnificent," she whispered. "That it is," Matthew agreed, though when Emma glanced back, she found him looking at her rather than the landscape. They made camp as darkness fell, Matthew efficiently building a small fire in a sheltered hollow that wouldn't be visible from a distance. He offered Emma his bedroll and took the first watch, his rifle across his lap. "Get some rest, Miss Newcomb. We'll reach Crescent Moon by midday tomorrow." Emma wanted to protest that she could take a watch too, but exhaustion claimed her almost as soon as she lay down. She slept deeply for the first time in days, feeling inexplicably safe under Matthew Morgan's vigilant protection. Morning came with the smell of coffee boiling over the rekindled fire. Emma woke to find Matthew offering her a tin cup and some jerky. "Not fancy fare," he apologized, "but it'll keep you going." "It's wonderful," Emma assured him, accepting the simple breakfast gratefully. The coffee was strong and bitter, nothing like the delicate china cups of tea she'd grown up with, but it warmed her from the inside out. They rode out as the sun cleared the eastern ridges. Matthew pointed out landmarks as they traveled, teaching Emma how to read the landscape. She learned to spot water sources, to identify edible plants, to recognize the subtle signs of wildlife. "You're a good teacher," she observed after correctly identifying a patch of prickly pear that could provide emergency hydration. Matthew shrugged, looking pleased. "Had a good one myself. Old Apache scout named 2 hawks who worked for the cavalry before settling near our ranch. Taught me how to survive out here when I was green as spring grass." As the sun climbed higher, Emma began to see signs of civilization fences appearing, then cattle grazing on distant hillsides. Finally, they crested a rise, and Matthew reined in, allowing her to take in the view of Crescent Moon Ranch spread out below them. The ranch house was larger than Emma had expected, a sprawling single-story structure of adobe and timber with a wide porch wrapping around 2 sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and a bunkhouse stood a respectful distance away. Corrals and stables completed the picture, all nestled in a verdant valley fed by a creek that gleamed silver in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," Emma said sincerely. Matthew's chest swelled slightly with pride. "Been building it up for 12 years now. Started with just the main house and 10 acres. Now we're running 800 head of cattle on 12,000 acres. As they rode down toward the ranch, a young man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes to watch their approach. He waved when he recognized Matthew, then jogged toward the house, clearly spreading word of their arrival. By the time they reached the main yard, several people had gathered, ranch hands pausing in their work, a Mexican woman wiping her hands on her apron, and prominently, a young man who stepped forward with a broad smile that mirrored Matthew's. "Pa. Wasn't expecting you back so soon," he called, reaching up to help Emma dismount. His hands were strong and sure as he lifted her down, setting her gently on her feet. "And certainly wasn't expecting company." "Miss Emma Newcomb, this is my son Michael Morgan," Matthew said, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Mike, Miss Newcomb had some trouble with those outlaws we've been hearing about. She was headed to Tucson when they attacked her stagecoach." Michael's friendly expression shifted to concern. "You're safe now, Miss Newcomb." He was his father in miniature, Emma realized, though lacking the silver at the temples and the lines of experience. His eyes were the same warm brown, his build similarly tall and broad-shouldered. But where Matthew carried himself with a quiet confidence, Michael radiated youthful energy. "Thank you," Emma replied, suddenly acutely aware of her disheveled appearance among these strangers. As if sensing her discomfort, the Mexican woman stepped forward. "Come inside, señorita. Rosa will help you freshen up. We have clothes you can borrow." Matthew nodded encouragingly. "Rosa's been with us since Michael was knee-high to a grasshopper. She'll take good care of you." Meanwhile, I'll send one of the boys to Tucson with a message for your uncle." Emma allowed herself to be led into the cool interior of the ranch house, which proved to be simply but comfortably furnished. Rosa showed her to a bedroom with a real bed, a luxury that brought tears to Emma's eyes and brought water for washing, along with a dress that she explained had belonged to Matthew's late wife. "Señor Matthew, he keeps some of her things," Rosa explained softly, "for memory. But she would want a lady and need to use them, The dress was simple but well made, a practical cotton in a soft blue that complemented Emma's eyes. It fit well enough with a few strategic pins, and once Emma had washed away the dust of travel and brushed her honey blonde hair into a simple knot, she felt human again. When she emerged, she found Matthew and Michael in the main room, deep in conversation that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Both men stood, and Emma was touched to see the appreciation in their eyes. "Miss Newcomb," Matthew said, clearing his throat. "You look restored," Michael smiled. "What Pa means is that you look beautiful, miss." He pulled out a chair at the long dining table. "Please join us. Rosa's made her famous stew, and we'd be honored if you'd share our table." The meal was simple but delicious: rich beef stew, fresh bread, and apple preserves. Emma found herself relaxing as the Morgans shared stories of ranch life, carefully avoiding any questions that might make her uncomfortable. Instead, Michael regaled her with tales of his first cattle drive, while Matthew quietly corrected his son's more outlandish embellishments. "Pa always keeps me honest," Michael laughed, not seeming at all bothered by his father's amendments to his stories. The easy affection between them warmed Emma's heart and reminded her painfully of what she had lost. After the meal, Matthew excused himself to send a ranch hand to Tucson with news of Emma's whereabouts. Michael offered to show her around the ranch, his enthusiasm infectious as he proudly pointed out improvements they'd made over the years. "Pa built this place from nothing," Michael explained as they walked through the vegetable garden Rosa tended. "He came here after fighting for the Union, looking for a fresh start." "He mentioned that," Emma said. 15 years, he said. Michael nodded. "He doesn't talk much about the war, says there's some memories a man's better off leaving buried." He plucked a ripe tomato and offered it to Emma. "But he taught me everything: how to rope, how to ride, how to treat people fair. Even taught me my letters when we couldn't afford to send me to school in town." "He seems like a good man," Emma observed, biting into the tomato, which was still warm from the sun. "The best," Michael agreed without hesitation. "After my mother died, I was just 5, it was just the two of us until Rosa came. He could have sent me east to relatives, made his life simpler. But he said we were a team." Pride rang in his voice. As they completed their tour at the corral where several hands were breaking a spirited colt, Matthew joined them, his expression grave. "I've sent Hank to Tucson," he informed Emma. "Should take about 3 days there and back, depending on whether your uncle's in town." "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Your kindness is overwhelming." Emma hesitated. "I have some jewelry I could sell to pay for my keep while I'm waiting. It's not much," but Matthew raised a hand to stop her. "You'll do no such thing, Miss Newcomb. Crescent Moon has never turned away someone in need, and we're not about to start now. Consider yourself our guest for as long as necessary." The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Emma, determined not to be an idle guest, insisted on helping Rosa with household tasks. The older woman was initially reluctant, but soon came to appreciate Emma's willingness to learn and her quick mind. Emma found satisfaction in mastering new skills, making tortillas from scratch, preserving vegetables from the garden, even learning basic Spanish phrases that made Rosa beam with approval. In the evenings, the household gathered in the main room. Matthew sometimes read aloud from one of his precious books, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Other times, Michael played the harmonica while one of the ranch hands, an older man named Jasper, accompanied him on a battered fiddle. On the 4th evening, Emma was helping Rosa prepare supper when Michael burst into the kitchen, his face alight with excitement. "Miss Emma, come quickly. Pa's about to start the branding in the south pasture. You said you wanted to see how we work the cattle." Emma looked down at her flour-covered hands and hesitated. Go, go, Rosa urged, making shooing motions. I finish here, you go see. Michael waited impatiently, practically bouncing on his toes. When Emma had cleaned her hands, he led her to where two horses stood saddled in the yard. I thought we could ride out together, he suggested. It's not far, but walking would take too long. The horse Michael had saddled for her was a gentle mare named Buttercup, nothing like the spirited stallion Matthew rode. Emma, who had learned to ride as a child on carefully groomed park paths, found the western saddle strange but secure as they rode toward a rising cloud of dust in the distance. The scene that greeted them was organized chaos cowboys on horseback skillfully cutting young calves from the herd, roping them, and bringing them to where a fire blazed with branding irons heating. Matthew was in the thick of it, his expertise evident in every economical movement as he directed the operation. Michael tethered their horses at a safe distance and led Emma to a small rise where they could watch without being in the way. "Pa's the best with a rope in 3 counties," Michael said proudly as Matthew effortlessly lassoed a calf that had broken away from the herd. "Taught me everything I know, but I still can't match him." Emma watched, fascinated, as Matthew dismounted and quickly had the calf immobilized. Another cowboy approached with the hot branding iron, pressing it briefly to the calf's flank. The animal bellowed, and Emma winced. "It hurts them less than you'd think," Michael explained, seeing her reaction, "and it's necessary. Without our brand, rustlers could claim our cattle as their own." Emma nodded her understanding, but her attention was drawn to Matthew, who was calming the calf with gentle hands before releasing it back to its mother. There was something compelling about the contrast between his strength and his tenderness. As the afternoon wore on, Emma became aware of Michael watching her as much as the branding. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Miss Emma, may I ask you something personal?" Emma turned to him, surprised by his serious tone. "You may ask, Mr. Morgan, though I reserve the right not to answer." He smiled at that. "Fair enough, I was wondering. What your plans are once your uncle is contacted? Will you stay in Tucson?" The question caught Emma off guard. She hadn't thought beyond reaching her uncle's home. "I suppose I will. He's offered me a position in his store. It's not what I'm accustomed to, but I'm learning that I'm capable of more than I realized." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "You certainly are. The way you've taken to ranch life, it's impressive. Most Eastern ladies would be counting the minutes until they could return to civilization." Emma laughed softly. "I must admit, I never imagined myself making tortillas or learning about branding cattle, but there's something honest about this life. Everything has a purpose. Everyone contributes." "Exactly," Michael's face lit up. "That's exactly it." "In Boston, were you happy, Miss Emma?" The direct question made Emma pause. Had she been happy? She had been comfortable, certainly. Secure in her social position, in the expectations for her future. "But happy, I thought I was," she answered slowly. "But perhaps I was merely content with what I knew. There wasn't much room for discovery." Michael nodded as if she had confirmed something important. Before he could respond, however, a shout went up from the branding area. One of the younger cowboys had been thrown from his horse and was lying motionless on the ground. Michael was on his feet instantly. "Stay here," he instructed Emma before running toward the commotion. Emma watched anxiously as Matthew and Michael knelt beside the fallen cowboy. After a tense moment, they helped him to a sitting position. Relief washed through her when she saw the young man move his arms, though he was clearly dazed. The branding operation paused as Matthew and another hand helped the injured cowboy onto a horse. Matthew issued instructions, then mounted his own horse and rode toward Emma. "We're cutting the day short," he explained when he reached her. "Young Riley there took a bad fall, nothing broken, but he needs to rest. Michael's taking him back to the ranch." He dismounted and took Buttercup's reins. "I need to move the herd to the north pasture before dark. Would you like to ride with me? It's peaceful work, nothing dangerous." Emma hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that, if I won't be in the way." Matthew's smile was warm. "You won't be, and I'd welcome the company." He helped her mount Buttercup, then swung up onto his own horse with the ease of long practice. They rode together to where the remaining cowboys were gathering the herd, Matthew giving quiet instructions that were immediately obeyed. As they began the slow process of moving the cattle, Emma marveled at the skill of the riders who kept the animals together with seemingly effortless coordination. "They make it look easy," she observed. "It isn't," Matthew replied, "but we've worked together a long time, each man knows his job." He guided his horse alongside hers. "Your job is simple, stay beside me and enjoy the view." The view was indeed spectacular. As they rode, the setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, the shadows of the cattle and riders stretching long across the grassland. The air was filled with the sounds of lowing cattle, the creak of saddle leather, and the occasional call from one cowboy to another. "It's beautiful," Emma said softly. Matthew glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "It can be hard, too." Droughts, blizzards, rustlers, disease, ranching has a way of testing a person. "Like life itself," Emma mused. When Matthew looked curious, she continued, "I thought my life was set on a certain path. Then my parents died, our money was gone, and suddenly everything I knew was swept away. It was terrifying, but also clarifying. I've discovered strengths I never knew I had." Matthew nodded slowly. "Adversity does that, reveals what's truly inside a person." He paused, then added quietly, "You have a great deal to be proud of, Miss Newcomb. Many would have broken under what you've faced." His sincere admiration warmed Emma more than she cared to admit. They rode in comfortable silence for a time, the cattle moving steadily toward the northern pasture. Gradually, the cowboys spread out to keep the herd together, leaving Emma and Matthew relatively alone at the rear of the formation. "May I ask about your wife?" Emma ventured finally, curiosity overcoming propriety. If Matthew was surprised by her boldness, he didn't show it. "Mary was a schoolteacher in Santa Fe when we met. I was delivering cattle there, and she was, unlike anyone I'd ever known, educated, refined, but with a spirit for adventure that matched my own." His expression softened with memory. "We had 5 good years before the fever took her. She gave me Michael, and she taught me that there's more to life than just surviving." "I'm sorry for your loss," Emma said sincerely. "Michael speaks of her rarely but with great affection. He was young when she died. His memories of her are few, which is its own tragedy." Matthew adjusted his hat, momentarily shadowing his face. "And you, Miss Newcomb, was there someone special in Boston?" Emma hesitated, then decided on honesty. "There was, or I thought there was. We were engaged to be married when my parents died. When it became clear that my family's finances were ruined, he found reasons to withdraw from the engagement." Matthew's expression darkened. "A man who abandons a woman when fortune turns wasn't worthy of her in the first place." "Perhaps not," Emma agreed. "But at the time, it felt like one more loss among many." They had reached the north pasture, and the cowboys began opening the gates to let the cattle through. Matthew and Emma waited, watching as the herd filed into the fresh grazing land. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns," Matthew observed as the last of the cattle passed through. "Sometimes what seems like disaster becomes the doorway to something better." As they turned their horses toward home, Emma found herself wondering if her current circumstances, stranded in Arizona territory, dependent on the kindness of strangers, might indeed be such a doorway. The ranch house was ablaze with light as they returned, the lanterns casting a warm glow into the gathering darkness. Michael met them in the yard, taking the horse's reins. "Riley's resting comfortably," he reported. "Just got his bell rung good. Rosa's kept supper warm for you both." Emma was suddenly aware of her rumbling stomach and the weariness in her muscles from the long ride. Matthew helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for your company today, Miss Newcomb," he said quietly. "Emma," she corrected impulsively. "After everything, I think you might call me Emma." His smile deepened. "Emma, then, and I'm Matthew." Michael cleared his throat, and Emma realized he was watching their exchange with interest. She felt a flush rise to her cheeks and moved toward the house. "I should help Rosa with supper," she said, though they both knew Rosa needed no assistance. Inside, she found the Mexican woman putting the finishing touches on the meal. Rosa took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "You have good day with Senor Matthew," she It was educational, Emma replied carefully. I've never seen cattle branding before. Rosa's knowing smile didn't fade. Senor Matthew, he is good man, strong but gentle. She patted Emma's hand. A woman could do worse, even a fine Boston lady. Before Emma could respond to this startling statement, Matthew and Michael entered, having quickly washed up outside. The conversation turned to ranch matters during the meal, but Emma was uncomfortably aware of Rosa's speculative glances between her and Matthew. After supper, instead of the usual gathering in the main room, Matthew excused himself to attend to some ranch accounts. Michael offered to show Emma the stars from the porch, his eagerness touching and slightly concerning given Rosa's earlier comments. The night was clear, the stars brilliant in a way Emma had never seen in Boston. Michael pointed out constellations, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. My father taught me the stars, he said. Said a man could always find his way home if he knew how to read them. Your father has taught you a great deal, Emma observed. Michael nodded. Everything important, he hesitated, then turned to face her directly. Miss Emma, I want to be direct with you. These past days, watching you adapt to ranch life, seeing your courage and your willingness to learn, I've grown to admire you greatly. Emma felt a flutter of alarm. Michael, please let me finish, he said earnestly. I know we haven't known each other long, but sometimes a person just knows when something is right. I believe you could be happy here at Crescent Moon. The life might not be what you're accustomed to, but it's a good life, an honest one. Michael, Emma said gently, are you proposing to me? His young face flushed. Not exactly, not yet, but I wanted you to know that I care for you, that there could be a future for you here if you wanted it. Emma was stunned. While she had grown fond of Michael, she had never considered him in a romantic light. He was younger than her by several years, and her feelings toward him were more sisterly than romantic. I'm honored by your regard, she began carefully, but I think perhaps your feelings have developed quickly because of the unusual circumstances. We've known each other less than a week. Michael's face fell slightly, but he rallied. I understand, it's sudden, but will you at least consider the possibility before you decide on Tucson? Before Emma could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders were coming up the drive, their figures dark against the night sky. Michael straightened, his hand moving instinctively to where a gun would be if he were wearing one. Stay here, he instructed, moving toward the door. Pa, riders coming. Matthew appeared almost instantly, buckling on his gun belt. He stepped onto the porch, positioning himself slightly in front of Emma and Michael. Evening, he called out as the riders drew closer. Crescent Moon welcomes visitors, but it's customary to arrive before dark. The lead rider raised a hand in greeting. Matthew Morgan, name's Frank Harrison, U.S. Marshal, got your message about the stagecoach robbery. This the surviving passenger. Emma stepped forward into the lamplight. I am Emma Newcomb. The marshal dismounted, followed by his 2 deputies. Miss Newcomb, glad to see you safe. We've been tracking that gang for months. They hit 3 coaches before yours. Matthew invited the lawman inside, where Rosa quickly produced coffee and food for the weary travelers. As they ate, Marshal Harrison explained that they had cornered the outlaws in a box canyon 2 days' ride away. Got 3 of them. 2 didn't survive the encounter, but we've got the leader locked up in Tucson, awaiting trial. He fixed Emma with a kind but firm gaze. We'll need your testimony, madam, if you're willing. You're the only surviving witness from your coach. Emma nodded, though the thought of facing one of the men who had caused such violence made her stomach clench. Of course, whatever I can do to see justice done. Good. The marshal turned to Matthew. We're also carrying a message for Miss Newcomb. Seems her uncle got word of the attack and has been searching for her. He's offering a substantial reward for her safe return. Emma felt a pang of guilt. My poor uncle. I hadn't thought about how worried he must be. He'll be relieved to know you're safe, Matthew said, though Emma thought she detected a note of regret in his voice. Marshal Harrison continued, We'll escort you to Tucson when you're ready, Miss Newcomb. Your uncle's eager to be reunited. A heavy silence fell over the room. Emma looked from Matthew's carefully neutral expression to Michael's openly disappointed one. Thank you, Marshal, but I'll need a day to prepare for the journey if that's acceptable. Of course, madam, we could all use a day's rest ourselves. Later that night, Emma stood at the window of her borrowed bedroom, watching the stars Michael had named for her. The prospect of leaving Crescent Moon filled her with an unexpected sadness. In less than a week, this place had begun to feel like home in a way Boston never had. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Thinking it was Rosa, she called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Matthew, still fully dressed despite the late hour. He remained in the doorway, maintaining propriety. "I apologize for disturbing you," he said. "But there are some things I thought you should know before you make your decision about Tucson." Emma motioned him in but left the door open. They both remained standing, maintaining a proper distance. "What decision?" she asked. "My uncle is expecting me," Matthew nodded. "And you should certainly see him, assure him of your welfare, but before you commit to staying in Tucson." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I overheard part of your conversation with Michael earlier." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "Oh. I hope you know I would never trifle with his affections. He's a wonderful young man, but he's a boy still in many ways," Matthew finished for her. "I know. And while I'm proud that he recognizes your worth, I also know his heart often runs ahead of his head." Relief flooded Emma. "You're not upset, then, that my son has excellent taste in women?" "No," Matthew's smile was gentle, "but I wanted you to know that his impulsive declaration doesn't have to factor into your decision about the future." Emma studied him, sensing there was more. "Is there something else, Matthew?" He took a deep breath. "Yes, the truth is, Emma, I find myself in an unusual position. My son has developed feelings for the same woman who has, awakened feelings in me that I thought long buried." Emma's heart began to race. "I don't understand." "I'm saying," Matthew continued carefully, "that I have come to care for you as well, not with the impulsive passion of youth, but with the steady certainty of a man who has seen enough of life to recognize something rare and precious." Emma was speechless, her mind whirling with implications. Matthew mistook her silence for rejection. "I understand this is unexpected, perhaps unwelcome," he said quickly, "and I would never ask you to choose between a comfortable life in Tucson and the hardships of ranch life. But I wanted you to know that there is a place for you here should you want it. Not as Michael's wife, nor necessarily as mine, but as someone valued and cherished." Emma found her voice at last. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing now," Matthew advised. "Think on it, talk to your uncle. Make the choice that will bring you happiness, whatever that might be." He moved toward the door. "Good night, Emma." "Good night, Matthew," she replied softly, watching as he closed the door behind him. Sleep eluded Emma that night as she wrestled with conflicting emotions. By dawn, she had made her decision. She rose early and asked one of the ranch hands to saddle Buttercup for her. She needed time alone to think, to feel sure of her choice. She rode out as the sun was rising, heading for a small mesa Matthew had shown her where wild roses grew improbably among the rocks. The morning was cool, the air sweet with sage and pine from the distant mountains. Emma let Buttercup pick her way up the trail, lost in thought. At the summit, she dismounted and stood looking out over the valley. Crescent Moon Ranch laid out below her like a model. From this distance, she could see the entire operation: the main house, the outbuildings, the corrals, and beyond them, the vast pastures where cattle grazed. In the distance, mountains ringed the horizon, their peaks still holding the last winter's snow despite the spring warmth. It was so different from Boston's crowded streets and formal gardens. Here, nature dictated the rhythms of life, not social calendars and proper visiting hours. Here, a person was judged by their character and capabilities, not their family name or bank account. And here, Emma realized she had found something she hadn't known. She was seeking a sense of belonging, of purpose. The sound of hoofbeats alerted her to another rider approaching. Emma turned to see Matthew guiding his horse up the trail. He dismounted a respectful distance away. "Rosa said you'd ridden out early," he explained. "I was concerned." "I needed to think," Emma replied, "about last night, about the future." Matthew nodded, moving to stand beside her at the overlook. "And have you reached any conclusions?" Emma turned to face him fully. Yes, I've realized that sometimes life takes away the familiar to make room for something better. Coming west wasn't my choice, but perhaps it was my destiny. Hope flickered in Matthew's eyes, but he remained cautious. What are you saying, Emma? I'm saying that I want to see my uncle to assure him I'm well, but after that. She took a deep breath. After that, I'd like to return to Crescent Moon if the offer still stands. Matthew stepped closer, taking her hands in his. It does, but I need to be certain you understand what ranch life means. It's not easy. There are comforts you'd be giving up, refinements you're accustomed to. Emma smiled, and gaining others in their place, purpose, community. The satisfaction of building something meaningful. She squeezed his hands. I've never felt more alive than I have this past week, Matthew. Never felt more, myself. The joy that spread across his face was answer enough, but he spoke the words anyway. Nothing would make me happier than having you return to Crescent Moon. As what exactly? Emma asked, her boldness surprising even herself. Matthew's smile deepened. As whatever you wish to be, Emma. A friend, a partner, he hesitated, then finished softly, a wife someday if your feelings grow in that direction, but there's no rush, no pressure, I'm a patient man. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at his consideration, and Matthew's expression grew serious. He's young. His heart will heal, especially when he understands that his father's happiness doesn't diminish his own importance. But I won't pursue this if you feel it would irreparably harm him. Emma considered this. I care for Michael deeply as a brother, a friend. I would never want to hurt him. But I think in time he would understand. I believe so too, Matthew agreed. He has a good heart. They stood in silence for a moment, the morning sun warming them as they contemplated the future. Then Matthew gently released her hands. We should return. The marshal will want to leave for Tucson soon, and you'll need to prepare. Emma nodded, but before they turned to their horses, she gathered her courage once more. Matthew, may I ask something of you? Anything? When I return from Tucson, will you be waiting? His expression softened with tenderness. Emma Newcomb, I would wait a lifetime for you if necessary. With that promise warming her heart, Emma rode back to the ranch beside the man who had rescued her not once, but twice, first from the wilderness, and then from a future that would have denied her the joy she now anticipated. The journey to Tucson with Marshal Harrison and his deputies took 2 days. Emma found herself comparing every vista, every settlement they passed, to Crescent Moon and finding them wanting. The marshal, noting her wistful expression, engaged her in conversation about the Morgans. Known Matthew going on 10 years now, he remarked as they made camp the first night. Good man, fair, stands his ground when it matters but isn't looking for trouble. Territory could use more like him. Emma smiled, pleased by this independent confirmation of her own assessment. He's built something remarkable at Crescent Moon. That he has, the marshal agreed. Came west with nothing, they say, now runs one of the most prosperous spreads in the territory. He studied her over the campfire. Seems to me you've made quite an impression at Crescent Moon. Emma felt her cheeks warm. They were kind to take in a stranger. Matthew Morgan doesn't do things out of mere kindness, Miss Newcomb. He's a deliberate man who knows his own mind. The marshal's shrewd eyes held hers. If he's shown you special regard, it's because he sees something special in you. These words stayed with Emma as they rode into Tucson the following afternoon. The town was larger than she had expected, a bustling settlement with proper streets, substantial buildings, and evidence of growing prosperity. The marshal escorted her directly to her uncle's mercantile, a large establishment on the main street with Newcomb's General Store painted in bold letters across the front. The reunion with her uncle, Edward Newcomb, was emotional. A tall, thin man with the same honey-blonde hair as Emma, though liberally streaked with gray, he embraced her with tears in his eyes. My dear girl, when we heard about the stagecoach robbery, I feared the worst. Your aunt has been beside herself with worry. Emma returned his embrace, genuinely moved by his concern. I'm so sorry to have caused you distress, Uncle Edward. If it weren't for Mr. Morgan's kindness, I don't know what would have become of me. Her uncle insisted on closing the store early to take her to his home, a comfortable 2-story house on the edge of town. There, Emma's Aunt Martha fussed over her, declaring her too thin and immediately setting about remedying this perceived deficiency with a substantial meal. Over supper, Emma recounted her ordeal, carefully editing certain aspects of her time at Crescent Moon. Her uncle listened with growing respect. "You've shown remarkable resilience, Emma," he said finally. "Your parents would be proud." "Indeed they would," Aunt Martha agreed. "And now you're safe with us. We've prepared the blue bedroom for you. It gets the morning sun, which I remember you always preferred." Emma hesitated, then decided that honesty was best. "I can't thank you enough for your generosity, but I should tell you that my stay in Tucson may be temporary." Her uncle and aunt exchanged confused glances. "But my dear," Uncle Edward said, "we've arranged everything. There's a position for you in the store, and Martha has already introduced your name in our social circle. Several respectable families are eager to meet you." "That's very kind," Emma acknowledged. "And I'd be happy to work in the store while I'm here. But during my time at Crescent Moon Ranch, I've discovered possibilities I never considered before." Understanding dawned in her aunt's eyes. "The rancher who rescued you, this Mr. Morgan, are you saying he's offered for you?" Emma smiled at her aunt's direct approach. "Not precisely, but there is an understanding between us. I've promised to return to Crescent Moon after ensuring you know I'm safe." Her uncle frowned slightly. "Emma, while I'm grateful to this man for saving you, ranching is a precarious life. The mercantile offers security, comfort, a position in society." "I understand that," Emma said, "and I'm not making this decision lightly. But in the short time I've spent at Crescent Moon, I've found a sense of purpose, of belonging that I never experienced in Boston." She looked between her aunt and uncle. "I'd like your blessing, but I want to be honest about my intentions." Her aunt and uncle exchanged another look, communicating silently in the way of long-married couples. "Well," her uncle said finally, "I suppose we should at least meet this rancher before forming any judgments. Perhaps you could invite him to dinner?" Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, Uncle Edward. I would like that very much." The next morning, Emma wrote to Matthew, explaining that she had arrived safely in Tucson and that her aunt and uncle wished to meet him. She entrusted the letter to the Tucson postmaster, who assured her it would reach Crescent Moon within 3 days. While waiting for Matthew's response, Emma immersed herself in learning about her uncle's business. The mercantile was larger and more diverse than she had expected, supplying everything from foodstuffs to farming equipment, clothing to mining supplies. Emma's education and natural intelligence allowed her to quickly grasp the bookkeeping system, and her refined manners proved an asset when dealing with the store's more prestigious customers. In the evenings, her aunt introduced her to Tucson society, such as it was a mixture of established Hispanic families, American merchants, and military officers from the nearby fort. Several young men showed marked interest in the newcomer from Boston, but Emma politely deflected their attentions. A week after her arrival in Tucson, Emma was helping a customer select fabric when she heard a familiar voice at the counter. "I'm looking for Miss Emma Newcomb." Her heart leapt as she turned to see Matthew standing just inside the store entrance. He had clearly made an effort, with his appearance, his usually practical clothing replaced by a well-tailored suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his face cleanly shaved. But it was the look in his eyes when he spotted her that made Emma's breath catch. "Matthew," she said, moving toward him with a smile she couldn't suppress, "you're earlier than I expected." "I received your letter and didn't see any reason to delay," he replied simply, removing his hat. He looked around the mercantile with genuine interest. "Your uncle has a fine establishment here." As if summoned by the mention, Edward Newcomb emerged from the back room. He assessed Matthew with a merchant's practiced eye, taking in his quality clothing, confident bearing, and the way his niece's face had lit up at his arrival. "Mr. Morgan, I presume," he said, extending his hand. "Edward Newcomb, I understand I owe you a debt of gratitude for my niece's safety." Matthew shook his hand firmly. "Anyone would have done the same, sir. Your niece showed remarkable courage through the whole ordeal." Uncle Edward invited Matthew to join them for supper that evening, an invitation Matthew readily accepted. As he left to return to his hotel to freshen up, he exchanged a brief, private glance with Emma that conveyed more than words could have. That evening's meal was a curious mixture of social niceties and subtle evaluation. Martha Newcomb served her finest dishes, while Edward subtly questioned Matthew about his ranch, his business practices, and his plans for the future. Matthew answered with straightforward honesty, neither boasting about his accomplishments nor minimizing the challenges of ranch life. "And your son?" Aunt Martha inquired. Emma mentioned him. "How does he feel about the situation?" Matthew's expression grew thoughtful. "Michael is a good young man with a generous heart. He was disappointed naturally, but he understands that his father's happiness doesn't diminish his own importance in the family." "So you have discussed your intentions toward our niece with your son?" Uncle Edward asked pointedly. Matthew met his gaze directly. "I have. I believe in honesty, Mr. Newcomb, especially within a family. Michael knows that I care deeply for Emma and that I hope she might consider a future at Crescent Moon." Uncle Edward nodded, seemingly satisfied with this response. "And what exactly are you offering my niece, Mr. Morgan?" "Edward," Aunt Martha exclaimed, embarrassed by his directness. Matthew raised a hand. "It's a fair question, Mrs. Newcomb. Emma is fortunate to have family who care for her welfare." He turned back to Edward. "I'm offering Emma a partnership, sir. Crescent Moon is prosperous and growing. I can provide comfortable living, financial security, and my complete devotion to her happiness. But more than that, I'm offering her a life with purpose, with meaningful work, in a community that would value her contributions." Emma, who had remained silent during this exchange, felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in Matthew's voice. Her uncle studied Matthew for a long moment, then turned to Emma. "And this is what you want, my dear, you're certain?" Emma nodded, finding her voice. "I am, Uncle Edward. I've never been more certain of anything." A slow smile spread across her uncle's face. "Well then. It seems Tuckson's loss is Crescent Moon's gain." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." As they toasted, Emma caught Matthew's eye across the table. His expression a mixture of joy and tenderness that promised a future brighter than any she could have imagined when the stagecoach had first set out from Boston. 2 days later, Emma stood on the porch of her aunt and uncle's home, her few possessions packed and ready for the journey back to Crescent Moon. Matthew had arranged for a proper buggy rather than horseback travel, considerate of her comfort for the long ride. "You'll write, of course," Aunt Martha said, adjusting Emma's bonnet unnecessarily, "and you must promise to visit." "Of course I will," Emma assured her, embracing her aunt warmly. "And you must come to see Crescent Moon once we're settled." Uncle Edward approached, carrying a small wooden box. "A gift," he explained, handing it to Emma. "Your mother's silver service. It should have gone to you after she passed. I think she would approve of where it's going now." Emma opened the box to reveal the delicate silver teapot and cups that had been her mother's pride. Tears welled in her eyes as she embraced her uncle. "Thank you. This means the world to me." "Be happy, Emma," he whispered. "That's all your parents would have wanted for you." Matthew helped Emma into the buggy, stowing her mother's silver carefully among their luggage. With final waves to her aunt and uncle, they set off, the road to Crescent Moon stretching before them. "Are you certain?" Matthew asked quietly when they had left Tucson behind. "There's still time to change your mind." Emma smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "I've never been more certain, Matthew. Crescent Moon already feels like home." The journey back to the ranch took 2 days, with a night spent at a small way station where the proprietor, assuming they were husband and wife, gave them a knowing wink that made Emma blush. Matthew, ever the gentleman, slept in the stable, insisting Emma take the room. As they crested the final rise overlooking Crescent Moon, Emma felt her heart swell with anticipation. The ranch lay spread before them, bathed in late afternoon sunlight, more beautiful than she remembered. "Wait," Matthew said suddenly, reining in the horses. He turned to Emma with an expression of barely contained emotion. "Before we go down there, before we begin this new chapter, I need to ask you properly." He took her hands in his. "Emma Newcomb, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Not someday, not eventually, but as soon as you're willing. Emma's heart soared at the certainty in his voice. Yes, Matthew Morgan, yes, with all my heart. His smile was brilliant as he leaned forward to seal their engagement with a tender kiss, their first. Emma felt the rightness of it down to her bones, this man, this place, this future they would build together. When they finally drove down to the ranch, they found Michael waiting on the porch, his expression anxious until he saw their joined hands and the happiness on their faces. To Emma's relief and Matthew's pride, the young man stepped forward to embrace her. "Welcome home, Emma," he said, his voice sincere despite the hint of wistfulness in his eyes. "Pa's been like a lost calf since you left." Matthew laughed, clapping his son on the shoulder. "No need to reveal all my weaknesses at once, son." Rosa appeared in the doorway, her face wreathed in smiles when she saw Emma. "La Señorita has returned. Come inside, you must be tired from journey." As they entered the ranch house, Emma was struck by how right it felt, the solid furniture, the practical arrangements, the warm welcome. This was to be her home, these people her family. The realization filled her with a contentment she hadn't known was possible. That evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Michael surprised them all by raising his glass. "To Pa and Emma," he said, his young face solemn, "may you have all the happiness you deserve." Rosa nodded approvingly. She, much a felicidad. "And perhaps soon, some little ones to make the house noisy again, eh, Rosa?" Matthew protested, but his eyes, when they met Emma's, held a question and a promise. After dinner, as the household settled for the night, Matthew led Emma out onto the porch. The stars blazed overhead, more brilliant than any city dweller could imagine, and the air was sweet with sage and pine. "Happy?" he asked simply, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she answered, leaning against his solid strength. "I never imagined finding this kind of happiness, especially after losing everything in Boston." Matthew's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes we have to lose the life we plan to find the life that's waiting for us." Emma turned to face him, marveling at how this man, so different from anyone she had known in Boston, could understand her so completely. "I love you, Matthew Morgan." His kiss was gentle but held the promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, he smiled down at her. "Welcome home, Emma." Welcome home. 3 months later, on a perfect June morning, Emma stood in the bedroom that had once been merely her temporary shelter and was now permanently hers. Rosa was helping her dress for the wedding, fussing over every detail of the simple but elegant gown that had arrived from Tucson just the day before. "Beautiful," Rosa declared, stepping back to admire the effect. "Like Angel." Emma smiled, touching the cameo at her throat, her mother's, the one piece of jewelry she had managed to save during the stagecoach robbery. "Thank you, Rosa, for everything. You've made me feel like family from the first day." Rosa's eyes glistened. "You are family now, first you, then babies." She made a rocking motion with her arms, causing Emma to blush. A knock at the door interrupted this line of conversation, much to Emma's relief. Michael's voice called, "Emma, Pa's getting nervous out there. Says if you've changed your mind, now would be the time to tell him so he can go drown himself in the creek." Emma laughed, crossing to open the door. Michael stood there in his best suit, looking handsome and almost grown up. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Wow," he said eloquently. "Pa might just fall over when he sees you." "Let's hope not," Emma replied, smoothing her skirts nervously. "Is everyone here?" Michael nodded. "Uncle Edward and Aunt Martha arrived an hour ago, the Reverend's ready. Even got the ranch hands cleaned up, though Jasper refused to take off that ratty old hat." Emma had insisted on a small ceremony at the ranch rather than in town, wanting to begin her married life in the place that had come to mean so much to her. The main room had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, and guests had traveled from as far as Santa Fe to attend. "Well then," Emma said, taking a deep breath, "I suppose we shouldn't keep them waiting." Michael offered his arm with a gallantry that reminded her strongly of his father. "Pa asked if I would do the honor of walking you down the aisle since your uncle will be standing with him." Emma felt tears threaten. "I would be honored, Michael." As they walked from the bedroom toward the main room, Emma's mind flashed back to that first terrifying day in the Arizona Territory, hiding behind the overturned wagon, clutching her pistol, certain that death was imminent. How could she have known that the approaching hoofbeats belonged not to danger, but to destiny? The small crowd stood as Michael led her into the room. But Emma had eyes only for Matthew, waiting for her beside the reverend, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to undisguised awe as he beheld his bride. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. When they exchanged vows, Matthew's voice was steady and sure, while Emma had to fight back tears of joy. And when the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests could probably be heard all the way to Tucson. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music and dancing. Emma found herself passed from partner to partner, Uncle Edward claiming a dance, then Michael, then various ranch hands who had become like family to her. But she always returned to Matthew, drawn to him like a compass to north. As the sun began to set, bathing the ranch in golden light, Matthew led Emma out onto the porch for a moment of privacy. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, the name sounding like a caress on his lips. "Mr. Morgan," she returned with a smile. "It appears we've survived our first social event as a married couple. Indeed we have." He drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. "And have I told you yet today how beautiful you are, how grateful I am that you chose this life, chose me?" Emma reached up to touch his face, marveling that this strong, good man was now her husband. "You rescued me that day, Matthew, not just from danger, but from a life half lived. I'm the grateful one." His kiss was tender but held a new urgency that made Emma's pulse quicken. When they parted, his eyes had darkened with desire. "Perhaps we should begin considering our departure. It's a long ride to Tucson." They had decided to spend their wedding night at the hotel in Tucson, giving them privacy while also allowing Rosa and Michael time to rearrange the ranch house to accommodate the new Mrs. Morgan more permanently. Emma nodded, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "A very sensible suggestion, husband." They slipped back inside to make their farewells, enduring good-natured teasing from the ranch hands and emotional embraces from Rosa and Aunt Martha. As they prepared to depart in the buggy Matthew had decorated with ribbons for the occasion, Michael approached with one final wedding gift. "I made this," he said, somewhat shyly, handing Emma a small wooden box. Inside was a beautifully carved miniature of the ranch house, every detail perfect from the wraparound porch to the windmill behind the stable. "Michael, it's exquisite," Emma breathed, truly impressed by his craftsmanship. "So you don't forget home while you're away," he explained with a grin. Matthew clapped his son on the shoulder, his pride evident. "We'll be back in 3 days, son. Try not to let the place fall apart without us." "No promises," Michael replied cheekily, but his expression grew more serious as he added, "Be happy, Pa, both of you." As they drove away from Crescent Moon, the sunset painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Emma leaned against Matthew's shoulder, contentment filling her heart. From the most dire circumstances had come the greatest blessing of her life, not just Matthew, but a home, a family, a purpose. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Morgan," Matthew said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Emma smiled, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I was just thinking that sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best days that follow. If that stagecoach hadn't been robbed, if you hadn't found me." "I would have found you somehow," Matthew said with such certainty that Emma believed him. "Some things are meant to be, Emma. You and I, we were written in the stars long before we ever met." As they rode toward Tucson and the beginning of their married life together, Emma knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, she had found her true north in Matthew Morgan and her true home at Crescent Moon Ranch. 5 years later, Emma stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Matthew and Michael worked with the new thoroughbred stallion they had purchased to improve their stock. The ranch had prospered beyond even Matthew's hopes, now encompassing 20,000 acres with over 2,000 head of cattle. But the greatest treasures in Emma's life were much closer to home. She smiled as 3-year-old Mary Rose Morgan came running across the yard, her dark curls bouncing, pursued by her twin brother William, both children squealing with delight. "Mama, Mama, Papa's letting us ride the new horse tomorrow," Mary Rose announced, throwing herself into Emma's skirts. "Is that so?" Emma asked, raising an eyebrow at Matthew, who was approaching with an apologetic grin. "A very gentle ride with me holding them," he clarified, scooping William up into his arms. The boy, a miniature version of his father, giggled as Matthew swung him onto his shoulders. Michael, now 23 and every inch a man, followed with an amused expression. "Don't worry, Emma, I'll be there too, making sure Pa doesn't let them gallop off into the sunset." Emma shook her head, unable to maintain even a pretense of disapproval when faced with the 3 Morgan men she adored. "See that you do. I have enough gray hairs from the last time William decided to help with the branding." The memory of her 3-year-old son attempting to lift a branding iron still made her heart stop, though Matthew had been right beside him, ensuring no harm came to the boy. Their children were being raised with a healthy respect for the dangers of ranch life, but also with the freedom to learn and grow in ways that would have been impossible in Boston society. Rosa appeared at the door, announcing that supper was ready. As they gathered around the table that had expanded to accommodate their growing family, Emma caught Matthew's eye across the array of dishes. "Happy," he mouthed silently, as he still did almost daily, even after 5 years of marriage. "Completely," she replied without hesitation, her heart full as she looked around at the family that had blossomed from that terrifying day when a stranger on horseback had offered water to a desperate woman hiding behind a wagon. Later that night, with the children asleep and the ranch quiet under a blanket of stars, Emma and Matthew sat on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as they enjoyed the peaceful end to another busy day. "I got a letter from Uncle Edward today," Emma said, nestling against Matthew's warmth. "He and Aunt Martha want to visit next month. They say the twins are growing too fast and they need to spoil them properly." Matthew chuckled. "Your aunt and uncle are welcome anytime. Though I think Rosa has the spoiling well in hand." Emma smiled, thinking of how the older woman doted on Mary Rose and William, slipping them treats and teaching them Spanish lullabies. "She does. We're fortunate to have such a family around us." "Speaking of family," Matthew said, his tone carefully casual, "Dr. Wilkins mentioned he might be riding out this way next week. Thought you might want to consult with him about that matter we discussed." Emma felt a flutter of excitement. They had been considering adding to their family, feeling ready for another child now that the twins were becoming more independent. "I'll make sure to be available when he visits." Matthew pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Have I told you lately what an extraordinary woman you are, Emma Morgan? Running this household, raising our children, keeping the books for the ranch. I'm not sure how you manage it all." "With considerable help," Emma replied, thinking of Rosa's assistance with the children, Michael's increasing responsibility for the ranch operations, and Matthew's unwavering support of everything she undertook. "And with the love of a very good man." Matthew turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life over what you might have had in Boston or Tucson?" Emma was surprised by the question. "Never, not for a single moment." She placed her hand on his cheek. "Matthew, the day you found me was the luckiest day of my life. Everything good that I have, our children, our home, our life together, stems from that moment." His smile returned, warm and tender. "Mine too, Emma, mine too." As they sat together in the quiet night, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place of profound contentment. From the terrified, desperate woman hiding from bandits to the confident ranch wife and mother, she had become the transformation still sometimes amazed her. But the greatest transformation had been in her heart. The young woman from Boston who had measured life by social standing and material comforts had discovered that true wealth lay in love freely given and received, in work that had meaning, in a home built on mutual respect and shared dreams. And it had all begun with a stranger on horseback, a canteen of cool water, and the promise of shelter from danger. Emma had smiled through tears that day, never imagining that the temporary refuge would become her permanent home, or that the kind stranger would become the love of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Matthew asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Emma smiled, leaning up to kiss him softly. "I was thinking about how sometimes the end of one story becomes the beginning of a much better one." Matthew nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Shall we go in, Mrs. Morgan? Tomorrow we'll be here before we know it." Hand in hand, they walked into the house that had witnessed their love story from its uncertain beginning to its flourishing present. And as Emma closed the door behind them, she sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever fate or providence had led her to this place. This man, this life that had exceeded every dream she'd never dared to dream.